Okay, I'm back. It's crazy how that's just a second for you, and for me it was like a whole half an hour. But you of the present, you of like actual right now, has just messaged me saying, are you free in half an hour for a call? So this might be cut short again before I get to the end of this chapter. I do apologize. Sorry. But yes, now I need to find where I am back on the page. A thunderstorm ushered Saturday in, leaving behind a thick layer of mud and air so heavy Carolinius felt he could wring it out like a sponge. He began to crave the salty food Cookie favoured and cleaned his plate at every meal. The effects of the daily training on his body left him stronger, more flexible and confident. He'd be a match for the locals, even if they spent the day mining. Not that hand-to-hand combat seemed likely, not with the Peacekeepers' arsenal, but he'd be ready if it happened. During target practice, he kept an eye on Sejanus, whose aim seemed a bit off. Good. A sudden reduction in his skills would draw attention. Another boy's estimation of his talents might be suspect, but he'd never known Sejanus to brag. If he said he was a crack shot, no doubt he was, which meant he'd be a real asset in the Mockingjay slaughter if he could be persuaded to try. He was obsessed with these Mockingjays. At the end of practice, Carolinius pitched the idea to the sergeant and felt gratified by his answer. That might not be a bad idea. Kill two birds with one stone. Oh, I hope more than two, Carolinius joked, and the sergeant rewarded him with a grunt. After a sweltering afternoon in the laundry, shuttling fatigues in and out of industrial washing machines and dryers, sorting and folding, Carolinius bolted down dinner and made for the showers. Was it his imagination, or has his beard filled in? He admired it as he scraped a razor across his face, another sign that he was leaving boyhood behind. He towel-dried his hair, relieved that his buzz had become less severe. Here and there he could coax a bit of a wave. The promise of a band at the Hob that night filled the bathroom with excitement. Apparently none of the recruits had followed this year's Hunger Games. Some girl is going to be singing there. Yeah, from the capital. No, not from the capital. She went there for the Hunger Games. Oh, guess she won. Their faces shiny with heat and scrubbing, Carolinius and his bunkmates headed out into the evening. The guard on duty told them to keep their heads up as they left the base. I guess the five of us could take on some miners, said Beanpole, glancing around. Hand to hand, sure, said Smiley. But what if they had guns? They can't have guns here, can they? Asked Beanpole. Not legally, but there's got to be some of them floating around out there after the war, hidden under floorboards and in trees and things. You can get anything if you have the money, Smiley said, with a knowing nod. Which clearly none of them do, said Sejanus. Being off the base on foot made Carolinius edgy too, but he put it down to the mess of emotions he was experiencing. He was by turns thrilled, terrified, cocksure, and madly insecure about seeing Lucy Gray. There were so many things he wanted to say to her, so many questions he wanted to ask. He didn't know where he'd begin, maybe with just another of those long, slow kisses. After 20 minutes, they arrived at the Hob, a warehouse of coal in better days. Reduced production had left it abandoned. Sorry, I can't read properly. Probably someone in the capital owned it, if not for the capital itself, but no oversight or upkeep was apparent. Along the walls, a few makeshift stores displayed odds and ends, much of them second-hand. Among the offerings, Carolinius saw everything from candle stubs to dead rabbits, homemade woven sandals to cracked eyeglasses. He worried that in the wake of the hanging they would be treated with hostility, but no one seemed to give them a second glance, and much of the clientele had come from the base. Smiley, who had wheeled and dealed in the black market back home, strategically sacrificed one cookie to sampling, breaking it into a dozen pieces and allowing tastes to people he deemed likely buyers. Mars magic hit home, and between direct trade with the bootleggers and money from the other interested parties, they ended up in possession of a quart bottle of clear liquid so potent the smell made their eyes water. That's good stuff, Smiley promised. They call it white liquor here, but it's our basic moonshine. They each took one swig, provoking a round of coughing and backslapping, and saved the rest for the tray. Still in possession of half a bottle of popcorn balls, Carolinius asked about tickets, but people waved him off. They don't care. They don't take their pay till after, said one man. Better get a seat if you want a good one. Expecting a crowd. The girl's back. Getting a seat involved grabbing an old crate, spool, or plastic bucket from a pile in the corner and staking out a spot where you could see the stage, which was no more than an arrangement of wooden pallets at one end of the hob. Coriolanus chose one against the wall, about halfway back. In the dusky light, Lucy Gray would be hard-pressed to notice him, and he wanted that. He needed time to decide how to approach her. Had she heard he was here? Likely not, for who would have told her? Around the base he was merely Ghent, and his exploits in the Hunger Games caused no mention. Nightfall came and someone flipped a switch, kicking on a hodgepodge of lights strung together by an ancient cable and several suspicious-looking extension cords. Coriolanus looked for the nearest exit in anticipation of the inevitable fire. With the old wooden structure and the cold dust, a stray spark could turn it into an inferno in a flash. The hob began to fill with a mix of peacekeepers and locals, mostly men, but with a fair number of women as well. There must have been close to 200 assembled in all, when a skinny boy of about 12, in a hat adorned with colourful feathers, came out and set up a single microphone on the stage, running a cord to a black box off to the side. He dragged a wooden crate behind the mic and retreated to an area blocked with a raggedy blanket. His appearance had set something off in the crowd, and people began to clap in unison, in a matter that proved contagious. Even Coriolanus found his hands joining in. Voices called for the show to begin, and just when it seemed it never would, the side of the blanket flipped back, and out stepped a little girl in a pink swirl of a dress. She gave a curtsy. The audience cheered as the girl began to beat on a drum that hung from a strap around her neck and dance her way to the microphone. "Ooh, Maud Ivory," hooted a peacekeeper near Coriolanus, and he knew this was the cousin Lucy Gray had mentioned, the one who could remember every song she heard. It was a big claim for such a young thing. She couldn't have been more than 8 or 9. She hopped on the box set behind the microphone and gave the audience a wave. "Hey everybody, thanks for coming out tonight. Is it hot enough for you?" she said in a sweet, squeaky voice, and the crowd laughed. "Well, we're planning on heating things up slightly more. My name's Maud Ivory, and I'm pleased to introduce the Covey." The crowd applauded, and she bobbed curtsies until they quieted enough for her to start the introductions. On mandolin, Tam Amber. A tall, raw-boned young man in a feathered hat came from behind the curtains, strumming an instrument similar to a guitar but with a body more like a teardrop. He walked straight to Maud Ivory's side, not acknowledging the audience in any way, his fingers moving easily over the strings. Next, the boy who'd sat at the microphone appeared with a violin. "That's Clerk Carmine on a fiddle," announced Maud Ivory, as he played his way across the stage, "and Barb Azure on bass," hauling out an instrument that looked like a large version of a fiddle. A willowy young woman in an ankle-length checkered blue dress gave the crowd a shy wave as she joined the others. And now, fresh from her engagement in the Capitol, the one and only Lucy Gray Bard. Coriolanus held his breath as she spun onto the stage, guitar in one hand, the ruffles of her acid green dress flaring out around her, her features brightened with makeup. The crowd rose to their feet. She ran lightly over as Tam Amber scooted Maud Ivory's box back and took centre stage before the mic. "Hey there, District 12, did you miss me?" She grinned as they roared in response. "I bet you never expected to lay eyes on me again, and that goes both ways. But I'm back. I sure am back." Encouraged by his mates, a peacekeeper sheepishly approached the stage and handed her a half-filled bottle of white liquor. "Well, what's this? Is that for me?" she asked, receiving the bottle. The peacekeeper made a gesture indicating it was from the group. "Now, you all know I stopped drinking when I was 12. A big laugh came from the audience. "What? I did. Of course, there's no harm in having some on hand for medicinal purposes. I thank you kindly. I do appreciate it." She considered the bottle, then shot the audience a knowing look and took a swig. "To clear my pipes," she said innocently in response to the howls. "You know, as bad as you treat me, I don't know why I keep coming back. But I do. Reminds me of that old song." Lucy Gray strummed her guitar once and looked around at the rest of the Covey, who were gathered in a close half-circle around the mic. "Okay, pretty birds. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, 3, and..." The music began, bright and upbeat. Coriolanus felt his heel tapping out beat even before Lucy Gray leaned into the mic. No, it's a song here. I'm not going to sing it for you. It feels a shame to just read it. Maybe I'll perform it. No, I'm just going to read it. My heart's stupid, and that's not maybe. Can't blame Cupid, he's just a baby. Shoot it, boot it, execute it. Still comes a crawling to you who. Heart's gone funny, it won't hear reason. You're like honey, you bring the bees in. Sing it, ring it, give it a fling. It still comes a crawling to you. I wish it mattered that you chose to smash it up. How come you shattered that thing I love with? Do you feel flattered that you could just trash it up? That's why you battered that thing I love with. Lucy Gray relinquished the mic, allowing Clerk Carmine to step up and do some fancy finger work with his fiddle, embellishing the medley while others backed him up. Coriolanus couldn't take his eyes off Lucy Gray's face, lit up like he'd never seen it before. That's her when she's happy, he thought. She's beautiful. Beautiful in a way anyone could see, not just him. That could be a problem. Jealousy pricked his heart, but no. She was his girl, wasn't she? He remembered the song she'd sung in the interviews about the guy who'd broken her heart and examined the Covey for a likely suspect. There was only Tam Amber with the mandolin, but there was no sparks flying between them. One of the locals, maybe? The crowd applauded Clerk Carmine, and Lucy Gray took over again. Trap my ticker, but haven't freed it. People snicker at how you treat it. Snare it, tear it, strip it, bear it. Still comes a crawling to you. Heart's been jumping just like a rabbit. Blood keeps pumping, but that's just habit. Drain it, paint it, I'm insane it. Still comes crawling to you. Burn it, spurn it, don't return it. Break it, bake it, overtake it. Wreck it, deck it, what the heck. It still comes crawling to you. After the applause and a fair amount of hollering, the audience settled down to listen to some more. As Coriolanus knew from helping Lucy Gray rehearse in the Capitol, the Covey had a wide and varied repertoire, and played straight instrumental numbers as well. At times, some of the members would exit, disappearing behind the blanket to leave the stage to a pair or solo performer. Tam Amber proved something of a standout on his mandolin, riveting the crowd with his lightning-fast fingering, while his face remained expressionless and distant. Maud Ivory, a crowd favourite, piped out a darkly funny song about a miner's daughter who drowned, and invited the audience members to join in the chorus, which, surprisingly, many of them did. Or maybe it was not that surprising, given how most were companionably drunk now. Oh my darling, oh my darling, oh my darling Clementine, you are lost and forever gone. Dreadfully sorry, Clementine. Some of the members bordered on unintelligible, with unfamiliar words that Coriolanus struggled to get the gist of, and he remembered Lucy Gray saying that they were from another time. During these in particular, the five Covey seemed to turn in on themselves, swaying and building complicated harmonies with their voices. Coriolanus didn't care for it. The sound unsettled him. He sat through at least 3 songs of this kind before he realised it reminded him of the Mockingjays. Fortunately, most of the songs were newer and more to his liking, and they finished up with the one he recognised from The Reaping. No, sir, nothing you can take from me is worth dirt. Take it, 'cause I give it free, it won't hurt. Nothing you can take from me was ever worth keeping. The irony of which was not lost on the audience. The Capitol had tried to take everything from Lucy Gray, and it had utterly failed. When the applause died out, she gave Maud Ivory a nod. The girl ran behind the blanket and appeared carrying a basket woven with cheerful ribbons. Thank you kindly, said Lucy Gray. Now, you all know how this works. We don't charge for tickets because sometimes hungry people need music the most, but we get hungry too. So if you'd like to contribute, Maud Ivory will be around with the basket. We thank you in advance. The 4 older Coveys softly played while Maud Ivory scampered around the crowd, collecting coins in her basket. Between the 5 of us, Coriolanus and his bunkmates only had a few coins, which didn't seem nearly enough, though Maud Ivory thanked them with a polite courtesy. Hold on, said Coriolanus. Do you like sweets? He lifted a flap of the brown package with the last of the popcorn balls so Maud Ivory could take a peek, and her eyes widened with delight. Coriolanus set them all in the basket, as if they'd been earmarked for the tickets anyway. If you knew Ma, more boxes were on their way. Maud Ivory did a little pirouette in thanks and hurried through the rest of the audience, and then ran up on stage to tug on Lucy Gray's skirt, showing her the treats in the basket. Coriolanus could see Lucy Gray's lips make an ooh sound and ask where they'd come from. He knew this was the moment, and he found himself take a step out of the shadows. His body tingled in anticipation as Maud Ivory lifted her hand to point him out. What would Lucy Gray do? Would she acknowledge him? Ignore him? Would she even recognize him, made over as he was, as a peacekeeper? Her eyes followed Maud Ivory's finger until they landed on him. A look of confusion crossed her face, then recognition, and then joy. She shook her head in disbelief and laughed. Okay, everybody. This is maybe the best night of my life. Thanks to everyone here for showing up. How about one more song to send you off to sleep? You might have heard me do this before, but it took on a whole new meaning for me in the Capitol. Guess you'll figure out why. Coriolanus moved back to his seat. She knew where to find him now, to listen and to savor their actual reunion, which was only a song away. His eyes teared up when she began singing the song from the zoo. Down in the valley, valley so low, late in the evening, hear the train blow. The train, love, hear the train blow. Late in the evening, hear the train blow. Coriolanus felt an elbow nudge his ribs and looked over to see Sejanus beaming at him. It was nice, after all, to have someone else who knew the significance of the song, someone who knew what they'd been through. Go build me a mansion, build it so high, I can see my true love go by. See him go by, love, see him go by, so I can see my true love go by. That's me, Coriolanus wanted to tell people around him. I'm her true love, and I saved her life. Go write me a letter, send it by mail, bake it and stamp it into the Capitol jail. Capitol jail, love, to the Capitol jail. Bake it and stamp it to the Capitol jail. Should you say hello first, or just kiss her? Roses are red, love, violets are blue. Birds in the heavens know I love you. Kiss her. Definitely just kiss her. No, I love you, oh, no, I love you. Birds in the heavens know I love you. Good night, everyone. Hope to see you next week. And until then, keep singing your song, said Lucy Gray, and the whole covey took one final bow. As the audience applauded, she smiled at Coriolanus. He began to move towards her, stepping around people collecting their makeshift seats to pile back in the corner. A few of the peacekeepers had gathered around her, and she chatted with them, but he could see her eyes darting away. He paused to give her time to extricate herself, and just to bask in the sight of her, glowing and in love with him. The peacekeepers were bidding her good night, starting to back away. Coriolanus smoothed his hair and moved in. They were only about 15 feet apart when a disturbance in the hop, the sounds of glass breaking and voices protesting, caused him to turn his head. A dark-haired young man around his age, dressed in a sleeveless shirt and pants ripped off at the knees, pushed through the thinning crowd. His face gleamed with sweat, and his movements suggested he exceeded his white liquor limit some time ago. Over one shoulder hung a boxy instrument with part of a keyboard along one side. Behind him trailed the mayor's daughter, Mayfair, taking care not to brush against the patrons, her mouth tight with disdain. Coriolanus shifted his gaze to the stage, where a cold, fixed stare had replaced Lucy Gray's eager expression. The other members of the band drew in around her protectively, their showtime levity draining away into a mix of raw anger and sadness. It's him, Coriolanus thought with dead certainty, his stomach twisting unpleasantly. It's the lover from the song. Chapter 24. Maud Ivory planted her wispy frame squarely in front of Lucy Gray. She scrunched her face and balled her hands into fists. You get out of here, Billy Torp. None of us want you anymore. Billy Torp rocked slightly as he surveyed the group. Less want than need, Maud Ivory. Don't need you neither. Go on and take your weasel girl with you, ordered Maud Ivory. Lucy Gray encircled her with her arms, pressing her hand against the girl's chest, either to soothe or restrain her. You're sounding thin, slurred Billy Torp, one hand slapping his instrument. We can do without you, Billy Torp. You made your choice. Now leave us be, said Barbara Zura, her quiet voice underlaid with steel. Tam Amber said nothing, but gave a small nod of assent. Pain flashed across Billy Torp's face. Is that how you feel, Susie? Clark Carmine curled his fiddle in close to his body. Although the covey varied in complexion, hair, and features, Coriolanus noticed a distinct resemblance between the two. Brothers, maybe? You can come with me. We'll do all right, we two, Billy Torp pleaded. But Clark Carmine stood his ground. All right, then. Don't need you. Never needed you anyway. Never will. Always better on my own. A couple of peacekeepers began to close in on him. The one who'd given Lucy Gray the bottle of white liquor laid a hand on his arm. Come on now. Show's over. Billy Torp jerked away from his touch and then gave him a drunken shove. In an instant, the sociable mood of the hob changed. Coriolanus could feel the tension, sharp as a knife. Miners who'd either ignored him or given him nods over their bottles became belligerent. The peacekeeper straightened up, suddenly alert, and he found his own body almost standing at attention. As a half-dozen peacekeepers moved in on Billy Torp, he felt the miners surge forward. He was readying himself for a brawl that was sure to follow when someone pulled the plug on the lights, sending the hob into darkness. Everything froze for an instant, then chaos erupted. A fist caught Coriolanus' mouth, sending his own fists into action. He struck out arbitrarily, focusing only on securing his own circle of safety. The same animal wildness he'd experienced when the tributes had hoisted him down in the arena swept over him. Dr. Gore's voice echoed in his ears. That's mankind in its natural state. That's humanity undressed. And here was naked humanity again, and here again he was part of it, punching, kicking, his teeth bared in the darkness. A horn outside the hob blared repeatedly, and truck headlights flooded the arena by the door. Whistles blew, and voices shouted for the dispersal of the crowd. People lurched towards the exit. Coriolanus fought the wave, trying to locate Lucy Gray, but then decided the best chance of finding her would be out front. He jostled his way through the bodies, still throwing the occasional punch, and spilled out in the night air, where the locals took flight and the peacekeepers gathered in a loose bunch, making only a weak show of pursuit. Most of them had not even been on duty, and there was no organised unit to address the spontaneous eruption. In the dark, no one was even sure who they'd been fighting. Better to let it lie. Coriolanus found it unnerving, though. Unlike at the hanging, the miners had fought back. Sucking on a split lip, he positioned himself to watch the door, but the last stragglers wandered out without any sign of Lucy Gray, the Covey, or even Billy Torp. He felt frustrated at having been so close but unable to talk to her. Was there another exit to the hob? Yes, he remembered the door by the stage, which must have allowed them to slip out. Mayfair Lip had been not so fortunate. She stood flanked by peacekeepers, not under arrest, but not free to go either. I've done nothing wrong. You've got no right to hold me, she spat at the soldiers. Sorry, miss, said a peacekeeper. For your own protection, we can't let you go home alone. Either you'll let us escort you, or we'll call your father for further instructions. The mention of her father shut Mayfair up, but did not improve her attitude. She seethed, her lips pressed into a thin, mean line that said someone would pay. Someone would pay. Just give her time. There did not seem to be much enthusiasm for the task of taking her home, and Coriolanus and Sejanus found themselves recruited for the job, either because they'd made a good showing at the hanging or because they were both relatively sober. 2 officers and 3 other peacekeepers made up the rest of the party. At this hour, what with the climate, it's probably far better to be on the safe side, one officer said. It's not far. As they wove through the streets, their boots grinding against the grit, Coriolanus squinted into the darkness. The streetlights illuminated the capital, but here he had to rely on the sporadic flickers from windows and pale beams of the moon. Unarmed, without even the protection of his white uniform, he felt vulnerable and stuck close to the group. The officers had guns. Hopefully that would keep the assailants at bay. He remembered Grandmam's words. Our own father used to say that those people only drank water because it didn't rain blood. You ignored that at your own peril, Coriolanus. Were they out there now, watching and waiting for a chance to quench their thirst? He missed the safety of the base. Fortunately, after only a few short blocks, the street opened up onto a deserted square, which he realized was the location of the annual reaping. A few unevenly spaced floodlights helped him navigate the cobblestones under his feet. I can get home fine from here, said Mayfair. We're in no hurry, one of the officers told her. Why don't you just leave me alone, said Mayfair. Why don't you stop running around with that good-for-nothing, suggested the officer. Trust me, that won't end well. Oh, mind your own business, she retorted. They made a diagonal cross, left the square, and followed a freshly paved road to the next street over. The party drew to a halt at a large house that might count for a mansion in District 12, but would be unremarkable in the capital. Through the windows, wide open in the August heat, Coriolanus caught glimpses of well-lit furnished rooms in which humming electric fans fluttered the curtains. His nose picked up a whiff of the evening's dinner. Ham, he thought, causing his mouth to water slightly and thinning out the bloody taste from his lip. Perhaps it was just as well he'd missed Lucy Gray. His lips were in no shape for a kiss. As one of the officers laid a hand on the gate, Mayfair pushed past him, darted up the path, and slipped into the house. "Should we tell our parents?" asked the other. "What's the point?" said the first. "You know how the mayor is. Somehow her traipsing around at night will be our fault. I can do without a lecture." The other muttered agreement, and the party headed back across the square. As Coriolanus followed, a soft mechanical wheeze caught his attention, and he turned to the shadowy bushes that lined the side of the house. He could just make out a figure standing motionless in the gloom, back pressed against the wall. A light on the second floor flipped on, and the yellow glow extended down revealed Billy Torp, nose bloodied, scowling directly at him. He held his instrument, the source of the wheeze, against his chest. Coriolanus' lips parted to alert the others, but something held his tongue. What was it? Fear? Indifference? Uncertainty as to how Lucy Gray would react? The band made their position clear when it came to his rival, yet he didn't know how they would take Coriolanus ratting him out, possibly landing him in jail. What if it made Billy Torp a sympathetic character, someone they would rally around and forgive? He could tell that the Coveys' loyalties ran deep. Then again, perhaps they would welcome it, particularly Lucy Gray, who might be very interested to know that her old flame had run to the mayor's daughter's house for solace. What had he done to be outs from all things Covey, band and home? He remembered the final words to her song, her ballad from the interview. "Too bad I'm the bet that you lost in the reaping. Now what will you do when I go to my grave?" Surely the answer lay there. Mayfair appeared and closed the window. Then she drew the curtains, blocking the light and concealing Billy Torp. The bushes rustled, and the moment passed. "Corio?" Sejanus had returned for him. "You coming?" "Sorry, just lost in thought," said Coriolanus. Sejanus nodded to the house. "It reminds me of the capital." "You don't say home," Coriolanus pointed out. "No, for me that will always be District 2, Sejanus confirmed. "But it doesn't matter. I'll probably never see the place again." As they walked back, Coriolanus wondered about his odds of seeing the capital again. Before Sejanus came, he thought they were 0. But if he could return as an officer, maybe even a war hero, things would be different. Of course, then he'd need a war to excel in, just as Sejanus needed one in order to be a medic. Coriolanus' shoulders relaxed when the gates of the base closed behind him. He washed his face and crawled into his bunk above Beanpole's inebriated snores. His pulse beat in his swollen lips as he replayed the evening. It had all gone like a dream, seeing Lucy Gray, hearing her sing, her joy at the sight of him, until Billy Torp had showed up and spoiled the reunion. It was just another reason to hate Billy Torp, although seeing the Coveys' rejection of him was deeply satisfying. It confirmed that Lucy Gray belonged to him. Sunday breakfast brought the bad news that, because of the previous evening's altercations, no soldier was to leave the base alone. The higher-ups were even considering placing the Hob off limits. Smiley, Bug, and Beanpole, although hungover and bruised from the night before, bemoaned the state of things, having nothing to look forward to if their Saturday outings were cancelled. Sejanus only cared because Coriolanus cared, recognising that this was just one more hurdle to seeing Lucy Gray. "Maybe she'll visit you here," he suggested as they cleared their trays. "Can she do that?" Coriolanus asked, but then hoped she wouldn't, even if she could. He had little unscheduled time, and where would they even be allowed to talk? Through the fence? How would that be viewed? Caught up as he had been in the romance of the previous evening, he'd been planning to greet her publicly with a kiss, but in hindsight that would have brought a barrage of questions from his bunkmates, and doubtless raised a few eyebrows amongst the officers. Their whole history, including his forced enlistment, would come out, and with it his cheating in the games. In addition, given the troubles between the locals and the peacekeepers, it would be wise to keep the relationship private. Whispering through the fence might encourage rumours that he was a rebel sympathiser, or even worse, a spy. No, if they were going to meet, he was having to go to her secretly. Today would be a rare opportunity to track her down, but he'd need a buddy to leave the base. "I think we'd better keep things between us a secret. She might get in trouble if she came here. Sejanus, did you have plans today? Or—" He began. "She lives in a place called the Seam," said Sejanus, "near the woods." "What?" said Coriolanus. "I asked one of the miners last night, very casually." Sejanus smiled. "Don't worry, he was too drunk to remember. And yes, I'd be happy to go with you." Sejanus told their bunkmates they were heading into town to see if they could swap a pack of Capital chewing gum for letter paper, but the ruse proved unnecessary, as all their mates took their abused bodies back to their bunks right after breakfast. Carlanius wished he had money for a gift of some kind, if he had nary a cent. As they passed the mess hall on their way out, his eyes fell to the ice machine, and he had an idea. In this hot weather, soldiers were permitted to take ice freely for their drinks, or to cool off. Rubbing cubes over their bodies provided a little relief in the sauna of the kitchen. Cookie, who he'd won over with his diligent dishwashing, gave Coriolanus an old plastic bag. The day being so hot, he agreed it would be all right to take some ice for their outing to ward off heat stroke. Coriolanus didn't know if the covey had a freezer, but by the looks of the house he'd passed on his way to the hanging, he thought that might be a luxury few could afford. Anyway, the ice was free, and he didn't want to go empty-handed. They signed out at the gate, where the guards cautioned them to be careful, and walked off in what they remembered to be the general direction of the town square. Coriolanus felt apprehensive. With the mines shut down for the day, though, a hush lay over the district, and the few people they passed ignored them. Only a small bakery stood open in the town square, its doors propped wide to allow breeze to temper the heat of the ovens. The owner, a beet-faced woman, had little interest in providing directions to non-paying customers, so Sejanus bartered his fancy chewing gum for a loaf of bread. Relenting, she took them out on the square and pointed at the street they were to follow to the scene. And I think, my love, we're going to need to leave that there. Though, obviously, you can just continue listening to the next clip, because you right now is messaging me. So